In the next couple of videos, I'm going to document the process in swapping out the 20R motor for the slightly bigger 22R. I've had this motor in here for a couple of years, and it's been fine for the most part, especially after upgrading the carb and swapping out the stock exhaust manifold for an aftermarket header. It's definitely helped bump up the power a little bit, make the engine a little bit more responsive, and it's made it much easier to work on the engine. But I'd like to swap in something with a little bit more displacement and a little bit more horsepower, and the 22R is about the easiest swap you can do with one of these. While I've had this motor in here, I did swap out I think it's the L42 transmission, and I swapped in the W50. It came stock with the L42, which was only a 4-speed. So I swapped in a 5-speed, which was just a night and day difference as far as drivability, having that 5th gear and the ability to go on the freeway. All right, so before I start the process of removing this, I figured I'd kind of document what I've done to it so far, in case any of you are looking to upgrade the 20R that you have. Aside from getting that fifth gear by swapping in the W50, I got rid of the stock carb and I went with the 3236 Weber, and that runs on the stock manifold. One of the first things I did was remove all the old emissions equipment. So as you can see, the bay is a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier to work on and diagnose stuff. I'm sure my stock carb wasn't running correctly when I pulled it, but once I slapped this on, this really woke up the engine quite a bit. So this is one of the best upgrades that I've done for the motor, and the good thing about it is I'll be able to swap the carb over to the 22R. Something else I did was I got rid of the stock exhaust manifold. I swapped it for a 4-to-1 pace setter header, and as you can see, I've wrapped the header with some exhaust wrap to help keep the engine temps down. Aside from that, just about everything else in the engine bay is stock. I did add an inline fuel pressure gauge for the Weber, and I'm running an aftermarket Autometer coolant temp gauge in the cab so I can keep an eye on things. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering why I've decided to swap in the 22R and not go with something with a lot more power. I have the 22R. It came with a parts truck that I purchased a while back, so I figured, for the little bit of time and a little bit of money to freshen up that engine, to swap it in here, it should make a noticeable difference. But I know some of you are thinking, why not just build a hybrid, which I may do in the future. And how you would do that is the 22R. I think it's like a pre-84, 85 block, which I'm pretty sure it is. And if I swap this head onto the engine, onto that 22R block, you can make what is known as the 20R, 22R hybrid, which I may look into down the road once I've installed the 22R, and I'll see how I like it. But I also may just, source everything that is needed to just upgrade to a 22RE and just, ditch the carburetor setup altogether. But in the end, I'm just looking for more horsepower and torque. So that's kind of what's behind doing this upgrade. All right, so this swap is about as straightforward as you can get. And some of the parts that I bought for the 20R are compatible with the 22R, like the 3236 Weber. That'll swap over, but I cannot use the 20R manifold. The bolt pattern is a little bit different on the 22R, so I'll need to use the 22R intake manifold, which is fine. This will bolt on to that manifold. The line in the gauge, I may need to lengthen or shorten, but obviously that'll work as well. On this engine, I did, along with the emissions delete, I also got the intake plug kit, so I'll have to get one of those for the 22R intake manifold as well. I've read conflicting things about the exhaust manifold. I was under the impression that when I bought this, that it would swap onto the 22R block. It's possible that this only works on the early blocks and not the 85 and newer. But I think it has to do with the bolt pattern in the middle of the header. I'll figure it out one way or another, but hopefully I can reuse this because I'd hate to have to rebuy this. If I had kept the 4-speed transmission, that would also have bolted onto the 22R, but the W50 also bolts on along with, and I can retain the flywheel, the clutch, and the pressure plate. So just a couple more things that I won't have to source. I can reuse the stock radiator, but some of the hoses may be a little tweaked, so I'll leave it as is and get the 22 in here and just kind of see how I like it. Otherwise, I may just purchase a new radiator and then just run the correct lines. I believe the distributor can be used on either engine. The 22 already has its own distributor, so I don't see why I would swap that over. I will need to retain the 20R alternator. Right now, the way it's wired up, if I just swap this over to the 22R, I shouldn't have to do any extra work. The 20R alternator is internally regulated, whereas the 22R isn't. So just to keep things simple, I'm just going to swap this over to the 22R, and I may upgrade this in the future to something bigger anyway. So I'll just keep the OEM unit for now. I'm pretty excited to get this swapped over. I put quite a few miles on this 20R, and I'm not sure exactly what I'll end up doing with it, but for now, I'll just set it aside. You know, maybe I'll find another project for it. And here's the 22R that I'll be swapping in. This is the engine I'll be swapping into my 77. I pulled this out of a 78 parts truck that I bought a while back. Kind of looks like a huge pile of crap right now, but in the next video, I'll document the process and kind of go over everything that I'm going to be replacing on this engine to prepare it before I drop it in. And I'll go over the process of removing all the emissions equipment and installing the Weber and getting the header back on and getting it looking a lot nicer than it currently does. So yeah, that'll end up being the next video.